One of the places that you've spoken about kind of using universal design, especially as it relates to artificial intelligence, and this is a place that's kind of dear to my heart because I really like talking about this is kind of in neurodiversity, and we use neurodiversity specifically, and you and I have kind of talked about how that doesn't even hit the nail on the head with this. But when I think of neurodiversity, I think of it as just kind of I'm simplifying, and this is not a technical way, but it's the diverse ways that we think. We all think very differently. I think very differently than Stephanie. And that's why we both are on the podcast in different ways. We think very differently from each other. But my way of thinking for me, if I use it appropriately, is a superpower.
Right? How boring would the world be if everyone thought exactly the same,
Right.
right?
Right.
We certainly wouldn't need different political parties. We wouldn't need different specialties. Everyone would have ultimate knowledge and the exact same way of thinking all of the time, which is just never the case.
Right. Well, okay. So let's talk about kind of using this idea of universal design to approach different ways of thinking, different ways of that our clients are going to be, different ways that our students are going to be. And now we have artificial intelligence.
So I want to start with that premise that, as you were saying, everyone thinks differently, right? And so
Mhm.
this is one of the things that universal design attempts to capture, right? So instead of saying here are our materials for people who are on the spectrum or people who have this issue or what have you, to make everything adjustable, I'll say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things that generative AI can do a really great job with because it is right, it will naturally adjust for you,
Mm.
if you use it. So some of this will be in individuals' hands, someone's given, as you said, the documents that you're given, for example, might be in a font and it might be up to you to change that font to something that works for you.
Right.
But we can also think about using the materials to help communicate with other people, right? One of the first things I have my students do, and I'm not sure this is specifically about universal design, but it's similar, is transform something that they've been doing for something written for a legal audience, right? A memo, um, into something written for a client without a lot of legal knowledge. And so this is the first time that I have them use generative AI with me, for example, because it does a great job of taking the content that you've given and translate it into a new context. And so you'll just say, could you please take all of this and rewrite it into a letter that someone with a high school education can understand, right? And it's great it's very adaptable in those ways.
Yeah.
And that's the first way. I also like to encourage my students to use it to help their own learning, right? So another aspect, and you might not have to say this is universal design, but it is related to diverse thinkers. I might explain something and think, wow, I just did such a great job explaining that. It must be crystal clear to every single person. And some people in the room might think that was crystal clear. I 100% understand what you're saying, but some people might still not understand what I'm saying, right? And so they can take information in one context and translate it for themselves. They can, for example, interact with generative AI. I put all of my handouts in a way that are obviously where students can copy any of the text and input it into any place that they want to. And so what they can do is say, my professor wrote this way too dense discussion of legal analogy. Could you please help me and give me some more examples so that I can learn a little bit better from this?
And that's never happened to any of us. We've never looked at what a professor wrote and thought, man, this is way too dense. I think an amazing way to think about this on both of those levels. One is I like to think about generative AI sometimes as how are we able to use it to expand what we're doing, to be able to, especially with clients, to be able to do something that we didn't think was really feasible previously. It's not super feasible for me to bring every one of my documents or every one of my contracts and kind of translate it into high school level. It is now.
Right.
And
Right.
so now I can use that to enhance people's understanding and maybe even draw back kind of the curtain. And so I increase people's trust in the legal field as well.
Right? I tell my students all the time that law is primarily a relationship building activity,
Mhm.
right? And so I do think that being able to converse with people more on their level, whatever that is, right, is a way of building relationships.
Yeah.